0.1. Make words seem more important than they are by the way you frame them. 0.2. Meditate on the many means it might be manifested. 0.3. Take your laws, your advertisements, your declarations of love, your song lyrics, your philippics, your insults, your wedding vows, your memoranda, your poetry, your declamations, your dog whistles, your disquisitions, your oaths, your tweets, your contracts, your words you're not allowed to say, your sermons, your prophecies, your oracles. 0.4. Hear how the simple act of putting words in the form of a list creates a phalanx of language in which each individual item trades away some of its quiddity in return for a greater portion of shared, slurred meaningfulness. I was at some kind of big family party, and we were in the dining room. And for some reason, it was decided that in the dining room, the table is full of glasses and plates, and there's china cabinets and everything. And I think there was even a TV going, but the TV might have been in like another room. I can kind of picture it in another room through some narrow hallway. We decided that we had to play like wiffle ball in the dining room. And it was one of those situations, and this is a feeling I recognize from life, where like I feel like I'm responsible for getting it going, making it happen, and yet I'm not positive everyone really wants to do it, so I'm trying to like not let it die in case people do want to do it, but not push it on people who don't want to do it. And I'm trying to figure out what we're going to use, and I think I decided on like crumpled up pieces of paper that would be least likely to break things. And then at the end of the dream, there was a recognizable song, which I remembered when I woke up, but I don't remember, like a kind of pop song from not now, but like probably when I was growing up. But the words were different, and someone was singing along, and I said, "You recognize?" Not singing along, but like humming along or whatever. And I said, "Do you recognize this?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course." And I said, "Yeah, but listen to the words. It's not the song you think it is." And I'm pretty sure that's the. And it was, I think that song was coming from the TV. 0.5. Is it better and more good for me to telegraph my scare quotes more clearly? 0.6. Is it necessary for me to know when I'm saying meaningful and when I'm saying meaningful? 0.7. What does necessary even refer to in this sense? 0.8. What part of any of this is necessary?
The ancient Greeks and Romans recognized two principal methods of divination, the one intuitive or natural, the other inductive or artificial. The former consisted in a certain divine madness or ecstasy, in which the human soul is possessed by the divinity, and while under this inspiration shows itself possessed of superhuman knowledge. The other method of divination was, on the contrary, a sane and rational procedure, derived from the observation of certain signs, such as the flight or cry of birds, but based, however, upon some primordial revelation. The first method was indeed the higher kind of prophecy, but the second was apparently the older, for it belonged to all the great seers of the heroic age, such as Cauchus, Helenus, and Tiresias, who always read the future in prodigies, or external signs. Indeed, a third method of divination might be added to the above, though not at all so common: oniromancy, or divination by dreams, particularly under the form of incubation, as it was called. This method usually connected with the Chthonian divinities and heroes, and we have seen that it was once in vogue at Delphi, when the cult of G there flourished.
1.1. If you were deciding whether to invade your neighbor or colonize an island or have sex with a relative or start a business, or you were wondering what you have to do to conceive a child or take over the kingdom or publish that book or end this plague, you might get it in your head to consult a higher power.
For 1,000 years of recorded history, the Greeks and Romans, sometimes as private individuals, sometimes as official ambassadors, came to Delphi to consult the prophetess. Her words were taken to reveal the will of the gods. These prophecies were not usually intended simply to be a forecast of the future as such. The Pythia's function was to tell the divine purpose in relation to coming events. Hence the question put to her usually took one of two forms. The most frequent was to ask, "Is it better and more good that such and such a course be adopted?" The Pythia's answer would approve or disapprove, and the meaning would be conveyed or disguised in ambiguous indications on the probable consequences of the suggested course of action. Alternatively, the inquirer might be resolved on his purpose, and might wish to consult the oracle only on the means to attain it. The inquiry then would take the form of asking to what gods or goddesses offerings should be made to achieve the specified object, and the Pythia's reply would prescribe the appropriate ritual.
1.2. Would you be willing to undertake the long and difficult trek to Delphi, where, on the 7th day of one of the 9 warmest months of the year, you might wind along the sacred way to the temple of Apollo? 1.3. If the goat kid chosen for that day's sacrifice didn't tremble from the hooves upward when it was sprinkled with water, would you be willing to put off your query for a more auspicious day? Auspicious. Formed as auspicinator plus the suffix ous. Auspicinator, obsolete form of auspicator. Auspicator, from Latin auspicat, see auspication, noun. Auspication, from Latin auspicatus, past participle of auspicare, auspicari, to take omens at the beginning of any business, to start prosperously, to begin, enter upon. See auspex. Auspex, Latin, contraction for avispex. Avis, bird, plus spex, an observer. 1.4. Would you pay the exorbitant rate they charge for one of the sacred cakes that serve as the entry fee to the temple area? 1.5. Would you be able to think only pure thoughts and speak only well-omened words once you entered the adytum? 1.6. Would you pity the Pythia in the grip of her enthusiastic frenzy, her body and spirit pillaged, her voice ungently seized by Apollo, so you might have elliptical access to the god's supernatural percipience, having made the trip, paid for your cake, and proffered your sacrifice? 1.7. And after all that, what kind of meaning would the words that emerge from the divine afflatus hold?
The artist. Lenses.
1.8. If you were willing to go through all the preparation and expense, and found yourself at the omphalos of the world beholding this mentic spectacle, do you think you could doubt that these were, however imperfect their translation from the divine to the human realm, the words of a god? 1.9. And, convinced that they were the words of a god, do you think you could spare any effort in your attempt to decipher the meaning? 1.10. And don't you suspect that after all that effort, even if there were some ambiguity as to the word's actual and precise meaning, the idea that the language you received in this way was supersaturated with meaning would be beyond the possibility of doubting? 1.11. Do you wonder if some degree of ambiguity in the language would actually make it more likely that you would be convinced of its surplus meaningfulness? 1.12. And now you, because you obviously didn't go to Delphi, and didn't sacrifice a goat, and didn't see the Pythia spit out the words of a god in the dark and smoky adytum, do you think it's possible to be convinced that a given set of language is meaningful, and be wrong? Adytum. Classical Latin adytum, innermost part of a temple, shrine, sanctuary. In post-classical Latin, also innermost part, 4th century with reference to a doctrine, 5th century with reference to the soul. Its ancient Greek edimon meant not to be entered.
Ambiguity, we might say, is the name impatient people give to language they don't want to work on, but it may also be the name others cling to until they find something better.
2.1. Without thinking too long about the question and the possible implications of my answer, without cross-referencing it with some other core beliefs that might be challenged by how I respond, my first instinct is to just roll with the tautology and say that this isn't the kind of thing you can be wrong about, that if something holds meaning for you, then it's meaningful. 2.2. When I think about it only a moment further, though, I realize that there is an obvious issue, and that it comes from the aesthetic sphere, which is obviously where it would come from, and it lies in the fact that there are whole genres of shows on television, and certain kinds of movies, and loads of pop songs, and plenty of literature that many people find perfectly meaningful, and that I find, for example, fatally sentimental. 2.3. Trying neither to conceal nor to defend my snobbery, I think I can, with a more or less clean conscience, bypass this minefield of aesthetic taste by granting that different objects can be meaningful to different people without at the same time feeling pressure to assert either that those objects are or that they are not equally meaningful in any kind of objective, essential, or transcendent sense. 2.4. But this only leads me to a different quandary, one where I am compelled to notice what feels like the intrinsic meaningfulness of a phrase like, "Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself," which, in combining anti-metaboly with potentially serviceable advice, first comes in a form we recognize as one that has been traditionally used to convey a certain class of meaning, we tend to call wisdom, and then uses it to communicate what at least some, and perhaps many listeners will take as valuable life advice that they should try to follow. And contrast that with the Delphi and Oracle's decree that a group of colonists should build their colony where the goat loves the briny surge, dipping the tip of his hoary beard, which, whether or not you accept that this kind of polysemy would be a form recognized at the time as one which might communicate divine wisdom, you have to acknowledge is wisdom that can only be valuable to this particular group of colonists, and only in their quest to find the divinely ordained location for this particular colony. Or, to boil it down, the aforementioned oracular statement offers a potentially potent, because so tightly focused, yet also extremely limited meaning. 2.5. Where this particular series of thoughts is leading me is, unsurprisingly, back to the simple machine, which I originally claimed and believed I built in an attempt to escape from the purgatory of meaningful language, but, thanks to a process of analogical thought I seem to be incapable of quelling, I now can't help but wonder whether in its actual operation is a mechanism for artificially, or not, since what that word might mean has not been properly vetted, inflating the meaningfulness of the words that are run through it.
Omens are signs full of meaning, and we may see the writing of the gods in them, but they are not institutions, and have nothing like the structure of authority that ordinarily goes with oracles. Omens are prolific and particular. Anything can be an omen. Kafka is suggesting to us that anything can be an oracle, and this is also true, but with a proviso. We shall need to invest the sign not only with exceptional or magical meaning, but also with a whole apparatus of intention and rules for consultation. We shall need to invent the institution we no longer have.
3.1. What I needed was to create a procedure that could free me from the anxiety of creating meaningful language, even while I proceeded to employ language, the only medium with which I have any facility. Three point two. I thought it would be fun. 3.3. It is not fun in the way I thought it would be. A couple of virus metaphors in the dreams last night. I think I don't even know if these two things I'm going to say are in the same dream. One is I was in Amsterdam, and a metaphor for like how your movements were controlled was like is it called a spirograph or whatever? Where you it's like a gear. You put your pencil in, the gear is inside another gear or whatever, and it looks like interesting, but the movement of the pencil is totally constrained by the movement of the gears. And I don't know, that was like in the dream, or I either used that metaphor in the dream, or the metaphor was in the dream, but I realized it was a metaphor. I'm not really sure.
3.4. I enjoy the act of writing, don't get me wrong. So when I say it's not fun, I'm using fun in the sense that playing with a ball or having a dance party can be fun, which isn't the only kind of pleasure available and rarely the kind associated with sitting at a desk typing on a keyboard. Whereas the pleasure that comes from writing, when it comes, which a good friend pegs at around 2% of the time, tends to be about feeling yourself at the limit of your abilities, about really exploring that limit. And undoubtedly, one of the reasons it can so often be less than pleasant is that when you are genuinely exploring your limits, you're going to fail at least as often as you succeed. And while exploring that limit, occasionally pulling something off that you didn't know you could do. And then another one of the possible pleasures of writing is the experience of feeling inspired, which is an actual phenomenon, but a dangerous one. Because it's rare, and if you wait around for it to come, you might never write anything. Since inspiration tends to come within the framework of an established routine, certainly for me, and I've heard the same from others. And if it does come to you at 4 in the morning, you can always make a voice memo or scratch a note out on a piece of paper, which, if you can decipher it in the morning, nearly every time turns out not to be the perfect solution for every problem you're having with your novel, even though that was your conviction when you took the time to record it. And what seems obvious from this vantage point, but was not when I began this sentence, was that of course it was going to lead to the idea of inspiration, which would naturally then circle me right back to the ostensible subject of this lecture, which is the oracle at Delphi. Inspiration, noun. Roman numeral 1, literal, physical senses. 1. The action of blowing on or into, obsolete, rare. 2. A. The action or an act of breathing in or inhaling, the drawing in of the breath into the lungs in respiration, opposed to expiration, noun, sense 2. Roman numeral 2, figurative senses. 3. The action of inspiring, the fact or condition of being inspired, a breathing or infusion into the mind or soul. A. Specific, theology, etc. A special immediate action or influence of the Spirit of God or of some divinity or supernatural being upon the human mind or soul. B. General. A breathing in or infusion of some idea, purpose, etc. into the mind. The suggestion, awakening, or creation of some feeling or impulse, especially of an exalted kind. (4.1) What I was trying to say before that digression was that I am worried the simple machine may not be working as intended. 4.2. The problem was at the start and continues to be about meaningfulness. 4.3. What I hoped was that the simple machine could take language that I was finding tediously meaningful and demean it. 4.4. What seems to be happening instead is that the simple machine maneuvers me, the operator, into taking semi-arbitrary constructions of language and meaning them. 4.5. The question is whether I should attempt to resist the constant infiltration of meaningfulness into my language. 4.6. But a better question might be how I would even begin to do that.
And then the other had to do with dogs, pet dogs, and there was like a chase scene on like maybe farm equipment or maybe like a old-fashioned kind of airline, the way you'd board a plane, those moving staircases. And the dogs were like vicious, and they were trying to like get the virus, or one of them had the virus and was trying to infect the other dogs. And then after that, and it was like they were like very violent. But later than that in the dream, I was with maybe my dog. It was like a really cute, like kind of fluffy dog. And it was being like super sweet. Maybe I was trying to take it out to the woods to shoot or something, get rid of. And it was super sweet. And we were kind of like cuddled up, and I was like, I guess I don't have to. It's over. But then it like, as soon as I tried to do something, it snarled. And I was like super, like ready to fight, ready to be violent.
4.7. Changing perspective slightly, here I am, approaching the end of this lecture, and glancing at some of the notes I made before I began, and some others I made in the midst of my writing, I see that I have not found a place to introduce the idea of the trickster, about which I thought I had some interesting things to say in the context of oracles. Nor could I address a paradox I thought I glimpsed regarding the literary use of oracles. Nor could I find a way to move the lecture in one or two vague directions I imagined it might go. And I wonder whether I've misunderstood something essential about the machine operator system. 4.8. At the oracle at Delphi, while the words of the god came through the mouth of the Pythia, it was the priest who communicated to the supplicant the content of the oracle. The priest, who was fully aware of the question the supplicant had come to ask, and who certainly would have let that knowledge influence how he interpreted the Pythia's ravings in delivering the answer. Or, to put it another way, the oracle is neither Apollo, the source of the inspiration, nor the Pythia, which received and transmitted the inspiration, nor the priest, who conveyed the Pythia's transmission in a form that might prove useful to the supplicant, but exists only in the combination of the various parts. 4.9. If one of the adversaries I've been trying to overcome in these lectures is my ego and its desire to assert excessive control over my deployment of language, and another is the existential nausea that often, and even more so as of late, accompanies the desire for, the attempt at, and the effectuation of meaningfulness, then it seems the operation of the simple machine, which is neither chance operations, nor the obtrusions by silence, the unconscious, and the words of others, nor the will of the operator, but their mutually frustrating combination, then, while it would be hyperbole to declare victory, the simple machine has perhaps helped me to negotiate some kind of temporary cessation of hostilities.
When the great flood washed over the earth, only this crag stood clear, a bold mark dividing sea from stars. And even you, Parnassus, lapped by those wide waters, could scarce uphold your crown. As it was, one peak lay hid. An avenger came this way, one whose mother was banished, though unborn twins waited her belly. Paeon's unpracticed shafts pierced Python, when Tamos had tenure of tripod and realm. Paeon, seeing how the earth's enormous chasms breathed forth divine truth, how the soil exhaled loquacious vapors, enshrined himself in the sacred caves. Brooding over the sanctum, he there became prophetic Apollo.